Layers and blends. What I'm going to be talking about in this tutorial is some simple techniques which can give you vastly more choice of articulation and give you more control over the articulations you've got. What I'm not talking about here is the orchestration equivalent of layers and blends, i.e. combining flute and violin and things like that. We're talking about good old sample orchestration and ways in which you can combine different articulations together, manipulate different articulations to create essentially much more variety and control. So if we look at a really, I think, fairly typical example, I do this all day long, all the time. So if we take, for example, this French horn sample here, which is sustained French horn, very straightforward, sounds great, sounds like this. It doesn't have much attack on the front, it's a soft attack. Now suppose you wanted a slightly more aggressive start to it. Well, what about a Marcato sample like this? But obviously that's just the Marcato, it doesn't last very long. So if you put the two together, what you get is this. So you're able to use the front of the Marcato to go into the sustain. And as you can see, I've drawn mod wheel. So the mod wheel goes up and down, so there's a bit of dynamic movement in that sustain note. But you could choose to have, for example, staccatissimo, so you can have an even shorter, more aggressive start. And actually what I frequently do is bounce them to audio. I bounce a lot of things to audio. It gives me more control. I can manipulate it more. Because look, once you've got these two things as audio, you can see very clearly how they line up. Let's just try and make them a bit bigger if I can, so you can see them. There we go. That's better. Right. So for example, suppose we want to crossfade them. So I can put a little fade on that, and I can fade that out there so that they crossfade, and then you've got control over the volume as well. So it goes like this. Oh, sorry. We'll come to that in a minute. So you essentially got a new, it's quasi like a new articulation, it's a sustain with a Marcato attack. Pretty cool. Let's move on to this one. You heard it there for a moment ago, which is runs. Now, runs are something which actually sometimes can sound much better if you combine them with other articulations as well. Now, the runs in BBC Symphony Orchestra are really, really good. So we're using, if you just use the standard legato, you will get a pretty good sound. But that might not be always the sound you want, which is the point here. So if you look at this, here's a cello legato. So it's very smooth, it's very, lush, but maybe we just want a little bit more edge to each of those notes. So instead of, you combine the shorts with the legato. If you listen just to the short, and the other one you can do is people frequently use tremolando actually in runs because it has a certain blurry effect which actually works really well. So if you blend those together, you end up with a much more controlled sound because you're choosing the style of bowing and style of playing rather than just relying on the string. If you were going to do a run and draw a slur over the top of it, that's pretty much what you get with the legato one. If you want you don't really want all absolutely individual notes. like shorts. What you probably want is a combination of that and something else. So the layering and blending can make a huge difference to your ability to produce a really vibrant sound. Right, let's now look at, this is a pro version one. Here's a line on violin ones, except it's not. Ha! Come on, you can do it. Okay, there's a little bit of overlapping there, which stopped it doing its dum-dum-dum. If it overlaps, it's not going to trigger the short, which is what we want it to do. Here we go, so let's listen to that again. So far, so good. Right, I've edited it, so I'm now going to copy that up. Right, suppose though we want, I mean, that's the sound of 16 violins, which is very nice, but suppose we actually want a little bit more edge to that. If we add in the violin leader, which I've just, this one up here, there we go, listen to the violin lead, and balance that against the section. You get a very different sound, and it gives you the ability to balance the kind of more sort of swooshy lyrical sound of the whole section against the individual sound. Frequently, when you're listening to a live section, very occasionally you'll hear just the edge of one instrument. You know, one instrument will just come to the fore. This is a very effective technique. I've been doing this since back in the days of the Akai S1000 or whatever. I mean, hardware sample, where even back then, with utterly, you know, we had 32 megabytes of memory in an Akai S1100. So you were able to find a very simple solo instrument and a section. And, you know, it worked back then and it works even better now. It works best of all, actually, with shorts. So if we get these two going, let me just fade down. Here we go. So. Okay. That's the section. Let's listen to the leader by himself or herself. So you get quite a lot of extra control. You get the ability to conjure up new articulations, or more realistic articulations, or articulations which are better suited to what you're trying to do by combining them. Sometimes you'll be able to combine them in MIDI and it'll work great. Other times you may well need to bounce it to audio to get that additional layer of control over blending, because if you're blending and layering, you need them to sound like one instrument a lot of the time, or one section, and that means very fine adjustments to levels and things like that to make it work properly. Anyway, go and try it, because there's so many different things you can do, and this is a fairly important technique when it comes to just going that extra mile, giving you the extra 15% that makes the difference between, it sounds great, and wow. And we're looking for wow. See you again.